Darkness is just as much a creation of God as is light. At least in Genesis, God creates light and then divides that light into light and darkness. One of the plagues of Egypt, a punishment directly from God, is 3 days of darkness. And when Jesus is crucified, the day becomes dark for roughly 3 hours, which is called the crucifixion darkness. The intervals 3 of something are obviously because 3 is the perfect and divine number, and God is directly causing this darkness. Yet despite it here also being divine, a lot of the Bible talks about overcoming darkness. There are arguments to be made about which darkness is literal and which is metaphorical, but ultimately there's a disconnect. In Dragon Quest 7, not all the areas that are God-forsaken are dark, but some are, and one of these is the town we visit now. The town of Nottagen initially seems very similar to others like Ballymolloy or Al-Balad. The people there are oppressed by monsters who run the town, so when you arrive, you're immediately attacked by monsters who guard the town. But after killing them, the people don't seem hopeful, but instead they seem even more afraid since you might have upset the boss of the town. If you explore the town, something is odd though. There's holes in the ground and people talk about a previous catastrophe. A man-eating plant that almost killed everyone until the sky was darkened by the monsters. And the monsters are selfish and abusive towards the humans, but they still act very humane. One only wants to run his own little shop, even if he's not good at it. Another just wants to eat, and the boss really likes taking baths. Regardless, you're the savior of the humans, so you kill the monsters. But it still only seems to get worse, since now that the boss monster is gone, his pet dragon, who is even stronger, is out of control. Once again, despite your best efforts, the situation just got worse. The dragon isn't out of your league though, and after a quick dungeon you can kill it and the sun rises again. In the present day, the town is entirely destroyed however, something even the monsters would not have done. So you go back to the past only to find out that now that the sun is back out, the man-eating plant I mentioned earlier has reawoken and is tearing the town up. Something worth mentioning is the heroic sacrifice of Rocky the Rock Bomb. He was one of the monsters from earlier that one of the townspeople, Buddy, took as a pet. He really unnecessarily blows himself up at the first opportunity and your whole party goes on to mourn him. It's an incredible scene. Afterwards it does take another dungeon, but eventually you find and exterminate the man-eating plant as well. But once again it's out of the frying pan and into the fire. And despite your best efforts, the town in the present is still destroyed. Back in the past, Buddy from earlier found himself a new pet among the roots of the dead plant monster. A worm monster named Wiggles that the other villagers are really scared of. Wiggles is being treated similarly to Ellie in her second to last scene. The villagers are unreasonably scared and they're letting their fear take control, making them lash out violently towards things they simply don't understand. It's ignorance, and having seen this exact same thing before, the course of action for the player should be clear in the next choice, in which the villagers ask you to kill Wiggles for them. And surprisingly, this choice changes how the rest of the event goes. If you kill him, the town gets overrun by similar looking monsters and everyone assumes it was because Wiggles sent out a distress signal. The monsters overwhelm you and everyone except for Buddy dies. Your party laments the lack of strength and in the present nothing is left of the town, except for a descendant of Buddy who now takes care of the monster enclosure, which is a side objective that you have purely for gameplay reasons. If however you didn't kill Wiggles, you find out that it wasn't your lack of strength, but a lack of compassion that destroyed the town, because after attempting to set Wiggles free, the worms attack nonetheless, proving Wiggles isn't at fault. And when everything once again seems lost, Wiggles comes to the rescue. He dies fighting, but it's enough to repel the monsters. Buddy erects a grave in his honor and thus the town is finally saved for real and all the struggles that only seem to result in things getting worse ran for nothing. The feeling this event invokes when everything keeps getting worse despite your best efforts is very similar to the Alltrade Abbey. But while that event felt monumental due to the sheer length, the much shorter one here feels meaningful because you are each time convinced that now the town is saved, only to be disappointed and the option to get a bad ending, even if you'd have to be trying to get it. What's interesting is that the first state the people were in wasn't all that bad comparatively. Some NPCs even say that it's better than before the monsters came, since the man-eating plant was still around. Them wanting you to not go against their oppressors seems like a reasonable call, especially if you consider how human these monsters act and how many new problems arise with the defeat of each threat. But ultimately, the continuous fighting was worth it in the end. It was worth standing up for everyone and not being scared of eventualities, not letting these people live in compromise. At least if you got a good ending and didn't kill Wiggles. So in the present, if you did save the town, there's not a lot going on except for one thing. We've talked about historical distortion a lot before, but here Wiggles' grave doesn't mention that he was a monster anymore. He is remembered as an assumed human hero, and thus the entire moral, everything the people or at least some people learned about prejudice, it's all been lost to time. And that entirely without monster influence.